We've also now seen who could be involved in that process. So the next step is actually to look at the detailed process. So what does the auditor have to carry out and when? So our first stage of the audit process is the acceptance stage. So before any work has been carried out, there needs to be some form of consideration made as to whether they should carry on with an existing client or accept a new client. So do they want the client? If they do, and they are satisfied that it isn't going to cause them unnecessary risk, then you would move on to the next stage of the audit process, which is the engagement. The engagement stage is very simply putting together a formal agreement between the auditor and the client. And so by having this agreement, this engagement letter between the auditor and the client, it will set out the responsibilities and it will make clear what needs to be done. And this very much helps us reduce the expectation gap. The next stage of our audit process is the planning stage. Now this is a big area of our syllabus. There's a lot to absorb because the more we plan and the more detailed our plan is, the better the rest of the process will run, just like any other big thing that you would be potentially planning in your lifetime. And so planning needs to make sure that you assess the risks. So it needs to look at what could go wrong very early on so that we can help manage what could happen and how we can deal with that. And then we also need to decide the type of work that needs to be carried out. And now to help us with our planning, and so is often being reviewed overlapping the planning stage, our next stage is to assess the internal controls and the systems, and this is at the client. So we're looking at the controls and systems that are used to help prepare the financial statements by the client. So the audit team needs to assess how reliable they are, and so they will initially conclude that they are either strong controls, so they're doing very well, or there might be some potential deficiencies and problems, in which case they may conclude that they are weak systems. We don't just assume that by our initial conclusion that's what we think they are. If we believe that the controls are strong, we will test them. So we'll carry out some audit work on the controls to see whether they are truly strong and therefore could reduce the risk of material misstatements being present. And so then we'll either agree, yes, they are strong, or it might be that we then conclude that there are problems in the system, in which case we believe the systems could be weak. This will have a knock-on effect with our next stage of the audit process. So the fifth stage is our substantive testing stage. This is where the audit team will carry out tests on the transactions. So they will test the numbers, they will test the disclosures, they will look in detail at the financial statements, and they need to see whether there is potential material misstatements. So they are looking at the numbers and they are also looking at the disclosures. This is an area of our syllabus that causes some of the biggest headaches. A lot of candidates really struggle with the substantive testing phase because it is very practical. We are thinking about how to test numbers, how to test certain areas of the financial statements. And so that is definitely flagged up as an area we need to make sure we do as much work on as possible, because it will come up in your exam and it is usually one of those areas where people struggle. Moving on though, for now, our sixth stage of our audit process is the finalization and review stage. So we are at the end of the audit process. They've carried out all of their audit work and we're now pretty much looking at the audit manager reviewing the audit team's work and making sure that everything has been completed properly.